This is Psalm 29. Some translations title it "The Voice of God in a Great Storm." Ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory of his name. Worship the Lord in holy splendor. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders, the Lord over mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. God makes Lebanon skip like a calf and Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord causes the oaks to whirl and strips the forest bare. And then the temple of the Lord all say, "Glory." The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord sits enthroned as King forever. May the Lord give strength to God's people. May the Lord bless God's people with peace. What does the voice of God sound like? This Psalm 29 seems like an attempt to answer that unspoken question. This week I had some fun on my social media page on Facebook, asking people to name some of their most favorite or iconic voices. I mentioned that this was for a little sermon research, so that may have been part of the reason I got such high-minded answers. Some people literally named people who had portrayed the voice of God in film, like Morgan Freeman. Other iconic voices mentioned repeatedly were James Earl Jones, Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash, Martin Luther King Jr., for the Texans especially Barbara Jordan, and that great poet, Maya Angelou. Folks seem to agree that what makes an iconic voice is some combination of the pitch, the tone, the resonance, some combination of that with the words that the person, the singer, the actor, the politician, the activist, were remembered to have spoken, and the significant context in which their words or music emerged. Folks also named a few of their least favorite voices. Some of that had to do with the quality of the sound. But repeatedly it was said that the most least favorite voices were because of the words that they spoke. The hatred or the lies that issued forth from their mouths. This Psalm 29 about the voice of God, some folks think is the oldest of all the Psalms. Many scholars believe that this text is a revision of a text that was used as a Canaanite hymn to the god Baal. It's believed that Israelites took the text of this hymn, turned it on its head, and used it as a polemic against the worship of Baal and in favor of the worship of their God, Yahweh. In the ancient world, it is quite possible that the loudest and most mysterious sound was that of thunder. And in this psalm, the sound of thunder is the voice of God. The voice of God sounds like the thunder. The Canaanite god Baal was known to be the god of weather and fertility. The combination of those two things always makes me chuckle just a little bit. Weather and fertility. Two things that we plan our lives around and are also a little unpredictable. Two things that can make a big difference in how our days and our lives unfold, for which we seek control but often feel that we have none. And so we go to the gods for help, for guidance. We want to appease them so that they might bless us. By taking this text of a Canaanite hymn sung to the god Baal and claiming it as a hymn for Yahweh, the Israelites are making an argument that it is Yahweh, the God of the universe, the true God of weather and creation, is the one who deserves our loyalty, not the false god Baal who leads us astray and ultimately into all manner of violence and destruction. Psalm 29 says that the voice of God, the thunderous voice of God, is powerful and full of majesty. That this Lord, this God, with the thunderous voice, is the one who gives strength to the people and is the true source of the possibility of peace. Fast forward to the story of Jesus' baptism in this very first chapter of the Gospel of Mark. Fast forward to the end of that story when John the Baptist baptizes his cousin Jesus. When Jesus emerges from those waters, the clouds part, and a voice, perhaps a thunderous one, emerges from the clouds to declare, "You are my Son, the beloved, in whom I am well pleased." Imagine what it might have been like to hear that voice from heaven. The scriptures don't really tell us if anyone but Jesus heard it. But imagine what it might have been like for him to hear these words at the very start of his ministry. as a foundation for all the work for justice and peace and healing that Jesus accomplished in his short ministry on earth. To know that at his core, before he had done anything or saved anyone, that he himself was first and foremost a beloved child of God, seen and heard and valued for his very being. Today, on this Baptism of the Lord Sunday, we recall our own experiences of baptism. And we try to remember that it is who we are at our most basic essence. It is who we are, that we are beloved children of God. Baptism, at its essence, is an experience of being held in the deep, deep love of God. But it's also an experience of loving accountability. The baptism with which Jesus was baptized, with which we are baptized, is a baptism for the forgiveness of sins. It's an experience of cleansing, an experience of new beginning, as Carrie Taylor said. It's an experience in which we acknowledge our humanness, both the glory of that and the brokenness, our tendency to do precisely that which we don't intend to do, to get distracted and led astray, to make choices that we regret, to turn toward false gods instead of staying loyal to the voice of God. Baptism is an experience of loving accountability in which we acknowledge our dependence on the Spirit of God at work within us. And we commit ourselves to a way of life that follows Jesus toward the cross. A way of life that's characterized by doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with God. Now, in the Gospel of Luke, following quickly on the heels of Jesus' baptism, and I mention Luke because Mark does not contain this episode. But in the Gospel of Luke, following quickly on the heels of his baptism, Jesus is led out into the desert by the devil. He is tempted. He is tempted in all sorts of ways, with food when he is hungry from fasting. He is tempted with political power, and ultimately he is tempted with immortality. In the Gospel of Luke, it says the devil led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, I will give you all their authority and splendor. it has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. If you worship me, it will all be yours. Friends, the important distinction I am trying to highlight today is a distinction between the voice of God and the voice of the deceiver. The voice of God says, "You are beloved." But the voice of the deceiver says, "You are special." One leads to a sense of solidarity with all of God's other beloved children. The other to a sense that the rules don't apply to you, that somehow you are entitled to something different. And at worst, this notion that you are special culminates in all manner of violence and greed. We have seen a manifestation of this worst at our nation's capital this week. The deceiver led his followers up to a high place and offered to give them all manner of authority, assuring them that only he could provide this to them. And if they are loyal to him, if they worship him, it can all be theirs. That is the voice of the deceiver. The voice that says, "You are special. Go home. You've done nothing wrong." The voice of God says, "Yes, you are beloved, but you are called to accountability for the well-being of all creation, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and your neighbor, every neighbor, as yourself." We hear so many voices in our culture clamoring for our attention. Many of them telling us that we are special, that the rules don't apply to us. But this is not the voice of God. This is not the way of Christ. So we must cling to the promise that God is still God and the deceiver is not. That as is promised in Psalm 29, the thunderous voice of the Lord will eventually set things right. We must avoid all manner of self-delusion and keep attuning our ears to the voices that lead us down paths of righteousness, so that we too can live up to the standards of the prophets of old, who call out to us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. May it be so. Amen.